Welcome. Find a comfortable spot, take a deep breath, and let's travel far, far back in time together. Imagine a vast desert, endless stretches of sand, rocky hills, and in the middle of it all, a small ancient city surrounded by dry mountains. Its name? Mecca. But hold on, this isn't the holy city you might think of today. Nope. Back then it was something very different. No tall buildings, no shiny malls, no air conditioning. Just simple people living simple lives under the blazing Arabian sun. In the 6th century, Mecca was already a popular city. Not because of its beaches, there weren't any, or its fine dining unless you count roasted dates, but because it sat right in the middle of a busy trade route. Caravans filled with goods would travel across the desert from Yemen in the south to Syria in the north, and Mecca was the perfect rest stop. Traders passed through with spices, leather, fabrics, perfumes, and sometimes even ostrich feathers. Yep, those were a thing back then. The people of Mecca were sharp. Since there wasn't much farming to be done in a land where even cacti struggled, the locals became merchants and traders, and business was good. Their wealth and connections made them powerful among the other Arab tribes. Now, let's talk about religion. To put it simply, it was a bit of a mess. Mecca was known for housing the Kaaba, a sacred cube-shaped building. Even in those days, people came from all around to visit it. But here's the thing. It wasn't a house of monotheism yet. Nope. It was packed with idols and statues. Over 360 of them, one for practically every tribe and their favorite little god. There was Hubal, Al-Lat, Al-Uzza, and many more names you probably won't hear at your local grocery store. And here's a fun fact. Even though people worshipped idols, they still believed in one supreme God called Allah. They knew he existed. They just figured the idols could help get them closer to him. Strange logic, right? Like asking a mailman to deliver your message next door. As for society, it was tribal. Everyone belonged to a tribe, kind of like a big family clan. Each tribe had its own leader, a sheikh, and they were fiercely loyal to their own people. If someone insulted your tribe, get ready for a fight. If someone harmed a member of your family, the whole tribe might chase them down. It was a harsh world. Strength in numbers meant survival, and honestly, it wasn't a great time to be weak, or an orphan, or a woman, or a slave. Sadly, those groups had little protection in that society. Now, in the middle of this sandy chaos, there was one tribe that stood above the rest. The Quraysh. They weren't just rich traders, they were the caretakers of the Kaaba, which made them hugely respected by all the other tribes. Within the Quraysh were smaller family groups called clans. And among those clans, one called the Banu Hashim was well known. They weren't the wealthiest, but they were famous for being generous, kind, and honorable. And guess what? It's in this very family that a certain someone named Muhammad ibn Abdullah would be born. A simple name, yet for a man who would one day change the entire world. Before Muhammad was even born, something incredible happened in Mecca. A king from Yemen named Abraha wasn't too happy about the Kaaba. He wanted people to stop coming to Mecca and visit his fancy cathedral instead. So what did he do? He gathered an army and, wait for it, elephants. Yes, actual elephants, in the middle of Arabia. Not exactly your usual desert animal. Abraha marched his army straight towards Mecca. The people were terrified. But then, according to ancient reports, something miraculous happened. tiny birds appeared in the sky, each carrying small stones. They dropped them on Abraha's army. The elephants refused to move any closer to the Kaaba. The army was defeated without a single warrior from Mecca needing to fight. That event became known as the Year of the Elephant. And you know what makes it even more special? That was the very year Muhammad, peace be upon him, was born. So now the scene is set. A city in the desert, a sacred cube filled with statues, tribes battling for pride and honor, and one elite tribe, the Quraysh, running the show. Life was tough, beliefs were confused, and society was stacked against the poor and powerless. But little did they know, a child was about to be born, a boy who would rise from this world of harshness and superstition, one who would one day challenge the idol worshippers, unite the tribes, and call people back to one true God. His name? Muhammad. And that's our first step into history. In the next chapter, we'll talk about his birth, the signs that surrounded it, and how his life began with loss, love, and strange little miracles. So for now, stay cozy, let your mind wander through the sands of Arabia, and get ready for the next part of the story. All right, get comfy again. Maybe stretch a little, take a slow breath, and let's pick up where we left off. The sands of Arabia are still warm. Mecca's bustling streets are filled with traders shouting about camel saddles and fresh dates. And somewhere in a modest home within the Banu Hashim clan, a young woman is about to change history forever. Her name? Amina bint Wahb. And the child growing inside her would become the greatest human being to ever walk this earth. Let's start with his parents. His father was Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib, a young Qurayshite known for his good character, kind nature, and charming looks. Some say he was so handsome, women would literally admire him in the market. Imagine being that guy. And then there's Amina, his mother, a gentle, thoughtful woman from a respected family in Mecca. Their marriage was simple and blessed. No big wedding halls, no over-the-top feast, just a quiet union between two good hearts. Not long after they married, Abdullah joined a trade caravan heading north to Syria. These trips weren't quick weekend getaways. It took months to cross the deserts and trade in distant markets. But on his return journey, tragedy struck. Abdullah fell ill in a town called Yathrib, which would later become Medina, and passed away, leaving his young wife pregnant and alone. Muhammad, peace be upon him, was born an orphan without ever meeting his father. A tough start in a tough world. And then came that special night. The night when the future prophet entered this world. The people of Mecca slept, unaware that the most blessed soul was about to arrive. Amina, in her modest home, gave birth without the usual panic or complications. It's said that a soft, calming light filled the room when he was born. A light so bright it reached as far as the palaces of Syria. Some even said mysterious signs appeared around the world. Fires that had burned for centuries suddenly went out. Statues and temples fell over. The skies sparkled. Coincidence? Or maybe, just maybe, the universe was celebrating. Now here's an interesting detail. When it came time to name him, Amina didn't go for one of the classic family names like Hashim or Abdul Muttalib. Instead, she named him Muhammad, a name barely known at the time. Why Muhammad? Because she'd seen it in a dream. An angel told her to name her child Muhammad, which means the praised one. A name so fitting it would echo through the world forever. When they told his grandfather Abdul Muttalib about the birth, he was overjoyed. He picked up the baby, carried him to the Kaaba, and thanked Allah for this precious gift. Now, back then, it was a tradition in Mecca to send newborn babies out to the desert for a few years. Why? Because the desert air was cleaner, the language spoken by the Bedouins was purer, and it toughened up the kids. Kind of like an ancient version of sending city kids to the summer camp, except with camels. A woman named Halima Sa'diya from the tribe of Banu Sa'd came to Mecca looking for a child to nurse. At first, nobody offered her a baby because she was poor, and her donkey was so slow it probably got overtaken by snails. But then she came upon little Muhammad, peace be upon him. And the moment she took him in her arms, her fortunes changed. Her donkey sped up, her animals gave more milk, and her life filled with blessings. She knew instantly this child was no ordinary boy. As a toddler, Muhammad, peace be upon him, grew up among the Bedouins of Banu Sa'd. He was calm, gentle, and never caused trouble. No tantrums over toys, no chasing goats into other people's tents. Halima noticed something special about him. He was polite, helpful, and remarkably peaceful for a child his age. And then there was the incident of the angels. One day, while playing with other children, 2 angels appeared, laid him down, and opened his chest. They removed a black spot, said to be a symbol of evil, and washed his heart with water from paradise before returning it to his chest. The other kids ran back to Halima screaming, but when she arrived, little Muhammad was fine, sitting quietly like nothing had happened. Halima, understandably freaked out, decided it might be time to return him to his mother. At around 5 years old, Muhammad, peace be upon him, was brought back to Mecca. He returned to his mother Amina, who was overjoyed to have him home. His grandfather Abdul Muttalib adored the boy. He would give him a special spot to sit next to him by the Kaaba, a place even the tribe's elders respected. It's said that anyone who saw young Muhammad could sense something unique about him. He carried himself with a calm dignity that no other child possessed. There was a quiet wisdom in his eyes even as a little boy. And so the child who would one day guide nations, challenge tyrants, and call humanity back to its creator was born into a world of idols, tribal feuds, and hardship, an orphan from the start, blessed with signs and protected by divine care. In the next chapter, we'll see how young Muhammad, peace be upon him, grew up, learning about life, facing trials, and earning a reputation for honesty and kindness that even his toughest critics admired. But for now, let yourself drift across the desert sands, feel the warmth of the night sky, and imagine a little boy with a heart of light, resting peacefully under the Arabian stars. All right, are you settled in? Maybe lying down, eyes half closed, the sound of the desert wind in your imagination. Good. Let's pick up our journey right where we left it, with a young boy growing up in the ancient city of Mecca. His name? Muhammad ibn Abdullah. His story? About to become even more beautiful. As you remember, Muhammad, peace be upon him, was born an orphan. His father passed away before he was even born. It's a tough thing, growing up without a dad, especially in a world where your tribe and your family meant everything. But young Muhammad wasn't just any child. He was calm, thoughtful, and so gentle that people often forgot how young he really was. Even as a toddler, he didn't throw fits or demand toys made of date pits like other kids did. There was a quiet light in him that everyone noticed. After returning from the desert with Halima, Muhammad, peace be upon him, was reunited with his mother, Amina. She loved him deeply. Every mother adores her child, but this was something else. Amina could sense there was greatness in her son. She held him close, protected him, and watched over him like the treasure he truly was. But life had other plans. When Muhammad was just 6 years old, Amina decided to visit the city of Yathrib, later known as Medina, with her son. It was a long journey over scorching deserts and rocky lands. She wanted Muhammad to meet some of his relatives from his father's side and visit Abdullah's grave. They made the trip, spent some time with the family, and then tragedy struck. On the way back to Mecca in a small village called Al-Abwa, Amina fell seriously ill. There were no doctors, no medicine, no hospitals. Just the endless desert and the clear night sky. And in that lonely place, Amina passed away. Imagine being 6 years old, far from home, losing the one person who meant everything to you. It was a moment of deep sadness, but also the beginning of the remarkable patience and strength that would define Muhammad's life. After his mother's death, Muhammad, peace be upon him, was taken in by his grandfather, Abdul Muttalib. Now, Abdul Muttalib wasn't just any old man. He was the leader of the Quraysh and one of the most respected men in Mecca. And even though he had many grandchildren, he treated Muhammad like no other. He made sure the boy sat next to him at important gatherings. Even the elders of the tribe respected this decision. They say Abdul Muttalib could sense something special about this child. Perhaps it was the way Muhammad spoke. Always kind, never wasting words. Perhaps it was how animals would approach him gently, or how other children naturally followed his lead. Either way, the old man's heart was attached to the boy. But life in the desert wasn't easy. And just 2 years later, when Muhammad was 8 years old, Abdul Muttalib passed away too. Now orphaned for the second time, the boy was taken in by his uncle Abu Talib, one of Abdul Muttalib's sons. Abu Talib wasn't rich, but he was kind, loyal, and deeply respected. He loved Muhammad like his own child, raised him, cared for him, and defended him later in life when the world turned against him. And so, under Abu Talib's care, young Muhammad, peace be upon him, grew. Strong in character, pure in heart, and wise beyond his years. Like many children of his time, Muhammad, peace be upon him, worked as a shepherd when he was young. Now you might be thinking, why would a future prophet be out herding sheep? Well, in those days, being a shepherd wasn't a lowly job. In fact, many prophets before him, like Moses and David, were shepherds too. There's something about caring for animals, watching over them, protecting them from wolves, and leading them gently across rocky paths that teaches patience, kindness, and leadership. Muhammad, peace be upon him, would later say, "Every prophet of Allah has been a shepherd." Even at this stage, the boy stood out. He was fair, trustworthy, and careful, never stealing, never cheating. The other shepherd boys respected him, and the town elders often praised him as Al-Amin, the trustworthy one. Throughout his childhood, strange and beautiful little signs continued to appear. People would feel an unusual calm in his presence. Animals behaved differently around him. Strangers would remark on the brightness of his face and the kindness in his eyes. Even though he was poor, even though he had lost both parents, Muhammad, peace be upon him, never complained, never asked for pity, and never caused trouble. Instead, he quietly watched the world around him. The unfairness, the idol worship, the cruel treatment of the weak. And it all stayed in his heart. A heart so pure, so kind that one day it would carry the final message from God to all of humanity. And so the young orphan of Mecca grew up. From the dusty streets of the city to the quiet hills where sheep grazed under starry skies. With every loss, his patience grew. With every hardship, his heart became softer. And little by little, the boy who had no parents, no wealth, and no worldly power was becoming the man who would one day light up the world. In our next chapter, we'll follow young Muhammad, peace be upon him, into his teenage years and early adulthood. How he made a name for himself as a merchant, gained respect far beyond his age, and stayed pure in a world drowning in greed and ignorance. But for now, take a slow breath, feel the cool desert breeze, and let your heart rest. All right, are you settled in again? Blanket pulled up, maybe a soft pillow under your head. Good, because tonight we're stepping into the teenage years and early adulthood of young Muhammad ibn Abdullah, a young man growing up in the ancient city of Mecca. The deserts still stretch endlessly. The streets buzz with merchants, and the scent of fresh dates and spices lingers in the air. And somewhere among the crowds, there's a calm, kind young man whose heart is different from the rest. As you remember, Muhammad, peace be upon him, grew up as an orphan, first losing his father before birth, then his mother at 6, and his loving grandfather at 8. Tough beginnings, right? But even though life gave him very little, it didn't break him. Instead, it shaped him into someone strong, patient, and incredibly kind. He never complained, never caused trouble. In a city where status and power meant everything, he quietly carried on, earning the respect of anyone who met him. During his youth, Muhammad, peace be upon him, spent a lot of time working as a shepherd. Now, being a shepherd might sound boring, but out there in the open hills, you learned things no classroom could teach. He learned to be patient because sheep aren't the brightest creatures, and getting them to listen is a daily challenge. He learned to protect the weak, guide the lost, and stay calm under the hot desert sun. He learned how to survive in the wild, how to track animals, and how to quietly reflect on life while watching the stars. These simple, quiet moments shaped his character in ways no one could imagine. As he grew older, the people of Mecca began to notice something about him. He wasn't like the other young men. While others lied, cheated, or showed off their wealth, Muhammad, peace be upon him, stayed honest, humble, and kind. People started calling him Al-Amin, which means the trustworthy. If you had a valuable item and were to leave his town, you left it with Muhammad. If you needed someone to settle a dispute, you asked Muhammad. Even those who didn't agree with his beliefs later on admitted that no one was more honest or fair than him. In a world filled with corruption, greed, and arrogance, he stood out like a shining star in the night sky. As a teenager, Muhammad, peace be upon him, began joining caravan trade trips. These were long, dangerous journeys across deserts, through mountains, and into distant lands like Syria. Traveling with merchants, he learned about the world beyond Mecca. He saw how other people lived, what they worshipped, and how unjust societies could be. But no matter where he went, he never lost his honesty. Even in places where cheating was normal business practice, Muhammad, peace be upon him, stayed true. Merchants loved traveling with him because he was fair, hardworking, and never took what wasn't his. In those years, Mecca was a tough city for anyone who wasn't rich or powerful. Slaves were treated like property. Orphans were ignored. Women had no rights, and the poor were often mistreated. But Muhammad, peace be upon him, couldn't stand injustice. Even as a young man, he would help those in need. If he saw an old woman struggling with a load, he'd carry it for her. If a child was hungry, he'd share his food. If someone was being bullied, he'd step in to protect them. He never showed off, never demanded thanks. He did it because it was right, and people remembered it. Now here's a story many people forget, but it's one of the most beautiful moments from his youth. When Muhammad, peace be upon him, was in his early 20s, a merchant from a distant land came to Mecca to sell his goods. Some powerful Quraysh men cheated him, refusing to pay. The poor man was stranded, helpless in a city where money ruled everything. Disgusted by this injustice, a group of good-hearted men, including young Muhammad, formed a pact. It was called Hilf al-Fudul, the Pact of the Virtuous. They agreed to stand up for anyone who was wronged in Mecca, no matter who they were, rich or poor, local or foreigner. Muhammad, peace be upon him, would later say that he never loved any agreement more than that one, and would answer its call even after becoming a prophet. Even then, before receiving revelation, his heart was already that of a leader and protector of justice. Unlike many other young men in Mecca, Muhammad, peace be upon him, didn't waste his time at wild parties or drinking gatherings. The city was known for its endless feasts, poetry battles, and reckless behavior. But Muhammad preferred the quiet. He would climb to the hills outside the city, sit alone under the stars, and reflect on life. He wondered why people worshipped idols made of stone or wood. He questioned why the rich mistreated the poor and why injustice was everywhere. His heart knew there had to be something better. And while others laughed at superstition or chased after fame, Muhammad, peace be upon him, was quietly preparing for a mission only heaven knew about. And so Muhammad, peace be upon him, passed his youth, a man of honesty, fairness, and compassion in a world that had lost its way. He was admired for his truthfulness, trusted with secrets and wealth, and loved for his gentle nature. A simple man in a simple city, yet his heart carried the weight of a future no one could yet imagine. In our next chapter, we'll meet Khadijah, a powerful businesswoman who would become not just his wife, but his closest supporter, best friend, and partner in a mission that would change the world. But for now, take a deep breath, feel the warmth of the desert breeze, and let yourself rest under the soft glow of ancient Arabian stars. All right, get yourself cozy again. Maybe stretch your legs, adjust your pillow, and let's travel back to the sun. Soaked streets of ancient Mecca, the market is alive with the sound of traders calling out prices, camels groaning under heavy loads, and the smell of spices hanging in the air. And somewhere in the middle of all this, a young man named Muhammad ibn Abdullah is about to meet someone who would become the most important person in his life. Her name? Khadijah bint Khuwaylid. And she's no ordinary woman. In those days, Mecca was not exactly a place known for giving women much power or freedom. Most women had little control over their lives, their wealth, or even their choices. But Khadijah, may Allah be pleased with her, was different. She was one of the wealthiest and most respected business owners in the entire city. Her caravan stretched from Mecca to Syria and Yemen. People admired her intelligence, her honesty, and the way she handled business better than most of the men around her. Widowed twice, she wasn't just sitting quietly at home. She was running one of the biggest trading operations in Mecca. Now, by this time, Muhammad, peace be upon him, had built a reputation across the city. They called him Al-Amin, the trustworthy. People knew that if Muhammad handled your business, Your goods would arrive safely, your profits would be fair, and no one would cheat you. And Khadijah had heard about him. So when she needed someone to lead one of her most important trade caravans to Syria, she chose him. She offered him a deal, manage her trade, and in return, he'd get a better share of the profits than anyone else. Muhammad accepted, not for the money, but because he valued honest work. And, well, you don't say no to Khadijah. On the way back from Syria, Maysara noticed something strange. Whenever the desert sun burned overhead, a small cloud would seem to hover above Muhammad, shading him from the heat. Even trees leaned slightly as he rested in their shade. At a marketplace stop, a Christian monk noticed Muhammad and said to Maysara, "This man is no ordinary person. A prophet's signs are in his face." Maysara couldn't believe what he was seeing. He'd traveled with many men before, but none like this. When the caravan returned to Mecca, not only had Muhammad, peace be upon him, made excellent profits, but he had also earned the admiration of everyone around him. Maysara rushed to tell Khadijah everything he'd seen and heard. How Muhammad never argued, never cheated, and how people seemed drawn to him. Not for his wealth, but for his character. And it touched Khadijah's heart. Now Khadijah was over 40 years old. Muhammad, peace be upon him, was around 25. In those days, society would have expected him to marry a younger, less powerful woman. But Khadijah didn't care about such things. She saw in Muhammad a man of honesty, kindness, and integrity, and she wanted him in her life. Through a close friend, Nufaisa bint Munya, Khadijah sent a quiet message to see if Muhammad might consider marriage. And to her joy, he agreed. Not because she was wealthy, not because of her social status, but because he respected her, admired her character, and felt peace in her presence. Now, Khadijah was over 40 years old. Muhammad, peace be upon him, was around 25. In those days, society would have expected him to marry a younger, less powerful woman. But Khadijah didn't care about such things. She saw in Muhammad a man of honesty, kindness, and integrity. And she wanted him in her life. Through a close friend, Nufaisa bint Munya, Khadijah sent a quiet message to see if Muhammad might consider marriage. And to her joy, he agreed. Not because she was wealthy, not because of her social status, but because he respected her, admired her character, and felt peace in her presence. Their marriage was simple. No lavish parties, no endless guest lists, no gold fountains. Just two noble, good-hearted people joining their lives in kindness and mutual respect. And from the very start, their marriage was filled with love. Khadijah supported Muhammad, peace be upon him, in ways no one else did. She comforted him when he was sad, celebrated his joys, and believed in him long before the world knew his name. She wasn't just his wife, she was his closest friend. Together they had several children. Their sons, Qasim and Abdullah, sadly passed away in childhood. But their daughters, Zainab, Ruqayya, Kulthum, and Fatima, would grow up to become strong, pious women. The household was filled with warmth, love, and simplicity. Even though Khadijah was wealthy, they lived humbly, always helping the poor and feeding the needy. Muhammad, peace be upon him, would later say that no woman was ever better to him than Khadijah. And so, in a city filled with arrogance, greed, and injustice, two beautiful hearts found peace in each other. Muhammad, peace be upon him, and Khadijah's marriage wasn't built on wealth or status. It was built on mutual respect, kindness, and trust. For 15 years before the first revelation, she was his home, his rock, and his biggest supporter. And when the world would later turn against him, she would stand by his side, believing in him when no one else did. In our next chapter, we'll follow Muhammad, peace be upon him, as he retreats to the Cave of Hira, seeking solitude, searching for answers, and preparing for the greatest moment in human history. But for now, let yourself drift into sleep, imagining the warmth of a simple home in ancient Mecca, where two souls found peace in a world of chaos. All right, settle back down, close your eyes if you want, and let's travel with Muhammad, peace be upon him, to a quiet place just outside Mecca. A place where the world seems to pause and the wind whispers secrets through rocky cliffs. This place is called the Cave of Hira. Back then, life in Mecca was busy. Noisy markets, camel caravans, and crowds of people everywhere. Sometimes Muhammad needed a break, a pause from the chaos. So he would retreat to this small cave, perched high on the mountain of Jabal al-Nur, the mountain of light. Up there, away from the city's noise, he could sit quietly, reflect and think about life, God, and the meaning of it all. You see, Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a deep thinker even as a young man. He couldn't help but notice how unfair life was around him. People worshipped statues made of stone and wood. The rich got richer by exploiting the poor. Injustice, greed, and cruelty were everywhere. He wondered, is this really how life was meant to be? At the cave, he prayed, meditated, and sought peace. He wanted to understand the truth, the one true God, beyond the idols and the noise of Mecca. One year during the month we now call Ramadan, something extraordinary happened. It was the night known as Laylat al-Qadr, the night of power. Although Muhammad didn't know it yet. He was about 40 years old, a humble merchant, a man known for honesty and kindness. But he felt a deep hunger inside, not for food, but for guidance and truth. Suddenly, in the quiet darkness of the cave, Muhammad was startled by the presence of a being unlike anything he had ever seen. It was Gabriel, the angel of revelation. Jibril spoke firmly but gently. Read, or Iqra in Arabic. Muhammad was confused. I cannot read, he replied. Jibril embraced him tightly and said again, Read in the name of your Lord who created man from a clinging substance. Read, and your Lord is the most generous. Who taught by the pen, taught man that which he knew not. This was the first revelation. These first words revealed the essence of what Muhammad was about to bring to the world. The call to read, learn, and seek knowledge, and to recognize the one true creator who teaches humanity. Muhammad was overwhelmed. He ran out of the cave trembling, fearing for his life. He didn't yet understand the full meaning of what had just happened. Muhammad rushed home, panicked and unsure. He told Khadija everything, the strange angel, the words, the fear. Khadija comforted him. She believed in him wholeheartedly and assured him that he was chosen for a great mission. She took him to her cousin, Waraqah ibn Nawfal, a learned Christian scholar, to seek advice. Waraqah confirmed that Muhammad had indeed received a divine message, just like the prophets before him. This moment marked the start of Muhammad's life as a prophet. For the next 23 years, he would receive revelations from Jibril, which would be collected as the Quran, the final message from God. But in the beginning, the weight was heavy. Muhammad felt isolated, scared, and unsure how the people of Mecca would react. Imagine sitting alone in a dark cave, suddenly hearing a voice commanding you to read when you never learned to read. Imagine feeling the weight of the entire world's future resting on your shoulders. And yet, in that moment, something else happened. A deep calm. A certainty that this was his purpose. And so, the quiet cave on the mountain became the birthplace of a revolution. A spiritual awakening that would ripple across continents and centuries. For now, rest your mind. Feel the desert night around you, and let the story of a man chosen by God soothe you into sleep. After receiving his first revelations, Muhammad, peace be upon him, started sharing his message quietly. At first, only close friends and family heard him. He told them about the one true God, Allah, and asked them to stop worshiping idols. Imagine the challenge. In a city where idol worship was a way of life and business, telling people their gods were fake was like telling a baker their bread was made of sand. But some people listened. The very first to accept Islam were those closest to him. Khadijah, his loving wife, the first believer and strongest supporter. His cousin Ali, a brave young boy. His close friend Abu Bakr, a respected and wise man. His freed slave Zaid, who found freedom and purpose through Islam. These early followers formed a small, close-knit community, the first Muslims. But not everyone was happy. The powerful Quraysh leaders saw Muhammad's message as a threat. If people stopped worshiping their idols, the Kaaba would lose its importance, and so would their wealth and influence. So they started opposing Muhammad, spreading rumors, mocking him, and pressuring people not to listen. Some tried to bribe him to stop preaching. Others threatened violence. The early Muslims were often poor and weak, making them easy targets. Women like Sumayya bint Khayyat faced torture and even death for refusing to give up their faith. The community hid in secret, met quietly at night, and supported each other through the hard times. Around this time, Muhammad, peace be upon him, faced great personal loss. His beloved wife Khadijah passed away, a devastating blow. She had been his rock, his comfort, and his closest friend. Shortly after, his uncle Abu Talib, who had protected him from enemies, also died. Without their support, Muhammad's position became even more vulnerable. Despite these hardships, Muhammad stayed strong. He never gave up his mission. He continued calling people to kindness, justice, and worship of the one true God. He showed incredible patience and forgiveness, even towards those who hurt him. Imagine standing alone in the face of fierce opposition, knowing you are right but feeling the weight of the world pressing down, but still choosing love over hate, truth over fear. And so the small group of early believers held tight to their faith, facing trials with courage and hope. In the next chapter, we'll explore the migration to Medina, a new beginning for Muhammad and his followers, and the foundation of the first Islamic community. For now, breathe deeply, feel the peace of the night, and rest easy knowing that even in the darkest times, hope shines brightest. As you remember, the leaders of Mecca grew more and more hostile. Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his followers faced constant threats, boycotts, and persecution. It wasn't just words anymore, their safety was at risk. The community was small and vulnerable, and staying in Mecca was becoming impossible. Meanwhile, in the city of Yathrib, later renamed Medina, far to the north, people had heard about Muhammad and his message. Yathrib was a city torn by tribal conflict and needed peace. A group of leaders from Yathrib sent a secret invitation to Muhammad, peace be upon him. They promised him safety and support if he would come and help unite their city. This was a huge opportunity, but also a huge risk. Muhammad began secretly planning the migration, called the Hijra, with his closest companions. They knew it had to be done quietly to avoid enemies in Mecca. One by one, the Muslims slipped away under the cover of night, traveling in small groups toward Medina. Muhammad, peace be upon him, was the last to leave Mecca. His departure was tense. The Quraysh plotted to capture him, but with careful planning and the help of his loyal friend Abu Bakr, he escaped. They traveled across the desert, hiding in caves and moving by night to avoid danger. One of the most famous moments on this journey was when Muhammad and Abu Bakr hid in the Cave of Hira for 3 days. The Quraysh searched everywhere, but they never found them. Legend says a spider spun a web across the entrance, and a pair of pigeons nested there. Signs that no one would dare enter. After days of travel, the group finally reached Yathrib. The people welcomed them with open arms, ready to embrace Islam and the peaceful message Muhammad brought. Medina wasn't just a city, it became the first true Islamic community, where people of different tribes and backgrounds lived together in peace. Muhammad, peace be upon him, worked hard to unite the people of Medina. He established a new social contract called the Constitution of Medina, which guaranteed rights and responsibilities for Muslims, Jews, and others. He promoted brotherhood, justice, and respect among all. The Hijra was more than just a move, it was a fresh start. It marked the beginning of the Islamic calendar and a new chapter for the believers. They had left behind persecution, danger, and loss, and stepped into a future full of hope. And so, under the desert stars, a new community was born, built on faith, trust, and shared dreams. As you drift towards sleep tonight, imagine the relief, the hope, and the excitement of starting over in a place where hearts could finally be free. All right, let's get comfy again and walk into the bustling streets of Medina, where the story of a new community is unfolding. A place where people from different tribes, backgrounds, and beliefs are coming together to build something fresh. Something based on justice, faith, and brotherhood. One of Muhammad's, peace be upon him, first steps in Medina was to create a peaceful agreement among its diverse inhabitants. This was called the Constitution of Medina, a groundbreaking document for its time. It wasn't just a list of rules, it was a pledge for cooperation and respect. Muslims, Jews, and other tribes agreed to protect one another and work together for peace. Imagine a city where everyone, no matter their tribe or religion, promised to stand united. In Medina, Muhammad, peace be upon him, built the first mosque, not just a place for prayer, but the heart of the community. It was where people met, discussed issues, learned, and supported one another. The mosque was simple, made of palm trunks, mud bricks, and palm leaves, but its importance was huge. It became a school, a court, a council chamber, and a place where the community's soul was nurtured. When Muhammad and his followers arrived in Medina, they were called the Muhajirun, the migrants who left their homes behind. But Medina already had people who welcomed them, the Ansar, or helpers. Muhammad encouraged these two groups to form brotherhood bonds, sharing homes, wealth, and support. It was a beautiful example of unity and generosity. Building a community wasn't easy. Not everyone in Medina accepted the new faith. Some tribes resisted, and tensions remained high. Muhammad had to be a leader, judge, and peacemaker, balancing justice with mercy. There were battles to defend the community and treaties to negotiate. In Medina, Muhammad, peace be upon him, introduced important social reforms, protecting orphans and widows, helping the poor and disabled, promoting fairness in trade and business. He challenged old customs that harmed people and encouraged kindness, honesty, and respect. More than laws, Muhammad's personal example inspired his followers. He was humble, patient, and always just. Even his enemies noticed his fairness, and so, from the ashes of hardship and exile, a thriving community grew, built on faith, justice, and unity. Tonight, as you relax and let your thoughts drift, imagine walking through Medina's palm-lined streets, feeling the spirit of hope and brotherhood in the warm desert air. All right, get comfy again. Close your eyes softly and let's continue walking alongside Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his companions as they face great challenges to protect their young community. As the Muslim community in Medina grew stronger, the leaders of Mecca and other tribes became more threatened. They couldn't ignore this peaceful but growing movement that challenged their power and traditions. Tensions rose. Threats turned into battles. One of the most famous battles was the Battle of Badr. A small, unlikely group of Muslims faced a much larger Meccan army. They were outnumbered and poorly equipped, but their faith was strong. Against all odds, the Muslims won a decisive victory. This battle showed that faith, courage, and unity could overcome even the toughest odds. After Badr, Muhammad, peace be upon him, showed great mercy to prisoners and enemies, teaching that even in war, kindness and justice must prevail. The Battle of Uhud was tougher. This time, the Muslims faced heavy losses and had to retreat. But Muhammad reminded his followers that patience and trust in God were the keys to success. Later came the Battle of the Trench, where Medina was surrounded by enemies. The Muslims dug a trench around the city as a defense, a clever strategy that kept them safe. Despite the pressure, the community stood firm, showing resilience and faith. These battles tested the young Muslim community but also strengthened it. They learned to stand together, trust in God, and never give up, no matter how hard things got. So, as you close your eyes tonight, think of that small group of believers standing brave under the desert stars, facing giants yet filled with hope and courage. All right, get comfortable and settle in as we enter a new chapter of Muhammad's, peace be upon him, story. A time when patience and wisdom brought a surprising peace to a restless land. In the 6th year after the Hijrah, Muhammad, peace be upon him, and about 1,400 of his followers set out peacefully towards Mecca. Their goal? To perform the pilgrimage, a sacred journey many Muslims make even today. But the Quraysh leaders weren't happy. They feared the growing influence of Islam and weren't ready to welcome Muhammad and his followers. The Muslims camped near a place called Hudaybiyah just outside Mecca. What followed was a tense standoff, with both sides wary and ready for conflict. But instead of fighting, Muhammad showed great patience and chose the path of negotiation. A treaty was drafted with terms that at first seemed unfavorable to the Muslims. The Treaty of Hudaybiyah included agreements such as a 10-year truce between the Muslims and Quraysh. Muslims would return to Medina without performing the pilgrimage that year. Both sides could peacefully coexist and maintain their own alliances. Many of Muhammad's followers were disappointed by the terms. Some thought it was a setback. But this treaty was a masterstroke of diplomacy. It gave the Muslims peace and time to strengthen their community without the threat of war. It allowed Islam to spread more widely as more people learned about its message. During this peaceful time, many tribes and individuals came to Medina, embracing Islam. The message spread like wildfire. Muhammad's reputation as a wise leader and just ruler grew stronger than ever. This moment taught everyone that sometimes patience and peace bring greater victory than battles. It was a lesson in trusting the bigger plan, even when things seem difficult. So tonight, as you prepare to sleep, think about patience and hope, and how sometimes the quietest choices can change the world. All right, get cozy again, and let's continue the story of Muhammad, peace be upon him, as he returns to Mecca. But this time, not as a hunted man, but as a victorious leader. After years of struggle, the time came for Muhammad and his followers to return to Mecca, but this wasn't a time for revenge or anger. Instead, it was a time for mercy and forgiveness. With an army of 10,000 strong, Muhammad marched toward Mecca quietly, surprising everyone by the size and speed of the movement. When Muhammad entered Mecca, he did something no one expected. He forgave those who had fought against him, even those who had harmed him deeply. He declared a general amnesty. He didn't destroy idols or punish enemies. Instead, he called people to worship the one true God and live in peace. The idols that had filled the Kaaba for centuries were removed. Muhammad purified the sacred house of worship, restoring it to its original purpose, the worship of Allah alone. This act of forgiveness shocked many. Instead of seeking revenge, Muhammad showed the world that mercy is stronger than hate. After the conquest, many people embraced Islam, inspired by the Prophet's kindness and fairness. The city that once rejected him became the heart of the Muslim world. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine walking through the peaceful streets of Mecca, feeling the power of mercy and the dawn of a new era. All right, get comfy and let's travel to one of the most important moments in the life of Muhammad, peace be upon him. His farewell pilgrimage, the last time he stood among the people as a guide and teacher. After many years of hardship and triumph, Muhammad, peace be upon him, made his final pilgrimage to Mecca, called the Hajj. Thousands of Muslims gathered with him, ready to follow his teachings and witness his final message. At Mount Arafat, the Prophet gave a powerful sermon that would be remembered forever. He spoke about equality, justice, and the importance of caring for one another. He reminded people that no Arab was better than a non-Arab, and no white person better than a black person. Only piety and good actions make a person noble. Muhammad, peace be upon him, emphasized kindness towards women, the importance of honesty, and the prohibition of injustice. He urged the community to stick together and support each other after he was gone. This sermon was not just words, it was a guide for how Muslims should live, treat each other, and build their society. After the pilgrimage, Muhammad returned to Medina, where he continued teaching, caring for his family and followers. He knew his time was short, but his focus remained on spreading peace and faith. Tonight, as you rest, imagine hearing the gentle, wise words of the Prophet, words that still echo around the world today, guiding millions toward kindness and justice. All right, get settled, take a deep breath, and let's softly step into the final chapter of Prophet Muhammad's, peace be upon him, life here on earth. A moment full of sadness, reflection, and hope. After years of teaching, guiding, and leading, Muhammad's health began to fade. He stayed strong in spirit but knew his time was near. His family, friends, and followers gathered around, feeling the weight of the moment. Even though he was tired, Muhammad, peace be upon him, continued to care for his community. He reminded them to be kind, to stick together, and to hold fast to their faith. His words were gentle but firm, a final reminder to live with justice, mercy, and love. When the moment came, Muhammad passed away peacefully in Medina, surrounded by loved ones. The city mourned deeply. Their guide, teacher, and beloved friend was gone. But his legacy was far from over. His teachings, the Quran, and the example of his life would continue to inspire millions for centuries to come. The followers of Muhammad, peace be upon him, vowed to preserve his message, spreading Islam around the world. As you drift into sleep tonight, think of a man who changed the world with kindness, patience, and faith, a light that continues to shine through the ages. All right, get comfortable one last time as we finish this journey together. Though Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, left this world, his message continued to grow and shape history in incredible ways. After his passing, the followers, called Sahaba, dedicated themselves to sharing his teachings far and wide. From the deserts of Arabia, Islam spread to new lands, Syria, Egypt, Persia, and beyond. The early Muslims worked hard to create societies based on justice, compassion, and unity, inspired by Muhammad's example. One of the greatest achievements was preserving the Quran, the holy book revealed to Muhammad, both in written form and in memory. This ensured that the message stayed pure and accessible to future generations. Today, over 1 billion people around the world follow Islam. They find comfort, guidance, and peace in the words and teachings that started with one man in a desert cave. As you close your eyes tonight, remember that one person's faith and kindness can truly change the world. And with that, our story comes to a gentle close. May this tale bring you peace and inspiration as you drift into sleep. Good night.